Hello and welcome to this webinar today brought to you by Storied. I am Heather Honert and I am very excited to share with you today Beyond the Fold, using newspapers to enrich your family stories. I adore newspapers. I could spend all day, every day looking in newspapers and finding all kinds of great tidbits of info about my family members to add to my family tree information and just their stories in general. So I'm going to talk to you today about lots of different things that you can find apart from just the ordinary things that you would expect to find in newspapers. So why use newspapers for stories? I think that all of these 5 reasons why I use newspapers for stories, I think really kind of interconnect. So if I find a newspaper article, it might be to help verify facts and authenticity, but it might also help bring my ancestors to life. So I'm going to talk about that a lot in the examples that I show you today, just how they kind of, I feel like, all work together. So the first one, verifying facts and adding authenticity. It's always great if you have a story that you know about your family, and when you find some kind of documented evidence that really helps back that up, I love to be able to do that. And newspapers are definitely a way that you can add some documented evidence to your stories to help bring them to life. Bringing ancestors to life. I think some of the articles that you find in newspapers, some of the information that you get is like nothing that you can find anywhere else. It is not like the typical names and dates that you're finding in historical records. It can be, but it can be so much more than that. And so I think sometimes these newspaper articles really breathe life into the descriptions of your ancestors and your family, really being able to add to the overall narrative of your story. And then connect with time and place and just chronological structure. So I love the idea that newspapers, again, can really bring in historical and social context to your stories, not just about your ancestors themselves, but what was going on around them while they were alive in the world, in their local communities. And then I think it also is great to add chronological structure. This was a really important one to me, and I'll show you an example of how that really helped me research one of my ancestors by creating a timeline of my ancestors. So this is a great one for newspapers and telling stories. And then what more can we ask for than to inspire and spark curiosity? Sometimes you'll read a newspaper article. A lot of times for me, I'll read a newspaper article and I will think, oh my gosh, I did not know that. Or it'll give me a little bit of information. And then I want to search and research other things because I'm like, I want to know more about that. So what is that all about? So they can really make great fodder for more stories for your family history. And then the last one is family dynamics. I think sometimes the information that you find in newspapers can add one to your family tree, add to your family members, people that you didn't know about, and even just relationships outside of the family tree, which I value immensely. That's one thing I love about Storied is that we're able to add relationships outside the family tree, and newspapers really bring that perspective into play and allow us to really kind of, again, back up those stories about friends that our ancestors had with articles from the paper. So I wanted to start really by talking about what's popular. I think that some people really get laser focused on the main things that people search for in newspapers and then let everything fall to the wayside. And that is such a waste. So what are those main things that people are looking for? It's kind of those nuggets that everyone thinks, okay, that's the only reason I'm coming to the newspaper is to find what? Births. So finding birth records, and you can find birth records, birth announcements. You might find hospital notes. So kind of everything that's related with births in newspapers. And I'll be honest, in my searches, as I've looked for my family, I think these are the ones that people want to find these, but they are few and far between. I think that, more recent you get, you're going to find more information. The farther back, especially when people were having home births, you may just not be lucky enough to find that information. So births is something people are always looking for. Marriages and anything related to that. So maybe the wedding itself, it could be engagements, marriage licenses, divorces, anniversaries. So anything marriage related, people are always interested in finding. These are the ones I probably have the most luck finding, marriage related things in newspapers. And then this one is the one that everybody's looking for. Everyone always wants to find the obituary, which granted, yeah, that's great if you can find it, but there are so many other things that can be just as valuable, if not more so. So don't get your sights just set on an obituary. To have a full-fledged obituary with really great background information about an individual and not just kind of a death notice with their date of death and maybe where they're being buried, to really have an obituary, again, you're not going to find a lot of those. I think if your ancestor was notable, yes, you may. But sometimes these can be hard to find, and this is what everybody wants to find. So don't limit yourself. And then the other piece is military records, enlistments and deployments. You're going to find all kinds of information about military in the newspapers. So these make great pieces to help back up stories and to tell stories and find all kinds of information about our ancestors. But what else is out there that we can use to help really build those family stories about our ancestors? So the first thing, so what I've tried to do is I have brought in articles that I have actually found and used in my own family research. And I think that's important just so that it's more personal and I can kind of talk to those and explain to you how I think they're important. And again, I think that so many of these types of examples that I'm going to show you, this one I'm showing is verifying facts and adding authenticity. But I think that they kind of hit more than just that. So the first one here is Mrs. Catherine Hamilton. So this was one that I had heard that my great-grandmother was, or actually great-great-grandmother was a teacher. But I couldn't find any information about that. And so this is an article I found in the newspaper saying that she actually resigned as a teacher at a school. And I'm actually going to come back to that idea of, it says she was at the Craig School. I'll bring that up in a future slide here. So this helped me to know that she was a teacher and resigned in 1891. Then this one is my all-time favorite marriage announcement that I have found. I found this for a friend of mine. And this is great because verifying facts, 1858, I might not be able to find the marriage record that I'm looking for in a historical record, but I found information in the newspaper. So think about those births, marriages, and deaths, not being able to find those types of records or birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates because of the time frame. You might find it in the newspaper. And then the bottom one is an example of a funeral. So again, kind of the idea of the death information. And this one is telling you location, where the residence was, time, all that kind of stuff. So these can kind of help back up those stories. Okay, next one is bringing ancestors to life. I love how sometimes the information in an article can just be something that really helps you to feel connected to an ancestor. So the first one, I was mortified when I found this particular article. My great-great-grandmother lived in Brooklyn, and her husband died when he was like right at 40. They were both about 40 years of age. My great-great-grandmother had 6 little children when he passed away. And this article was basically people in the neighborhood saying that she left and he was in bad health and it was her fault that he died. I mean, it's just crazy to me. Like the poor woman, my gosh, she has 6 small children. I can't imagine how distraught she was at having this rumor spread in the newspaper. And it was telling, the doctor was saying, it was not her fault. But that one really brought to life that ancestor for me. The middle one is an example. My great-great-grandfather played baseball, and my grandma told me that, and she didn't really have any stories that went along with it, just that he played baseball. And so this was him kind of going up to the minor leagues. And and he was going to New York to start playing in the minor leagues. So that was kind of a cool thing to be able to find that. And then the other one here, the third one on the far right, is just an example of a really descript wedding announcement that really helps me to see, what they were wearing, and it kind of really fills in the day for me. This was my husband's grandparents. So I think finding that those kinds of stories really bring those people to life. They really do. Historical and social context. I love this. And I have so many articles that I have saved because I think it's important to kind of use these to help ground your ancestors in history. And so the one on the left is an example. My grandfather's brother was born in 1912. So I grabbed this newspaper page. He was a couple of months old when the Titanic sank. So I think it's great to be able to kind of put your ancestors in time where they were. So his brother was born the year the Titanic sunk. The next one is an example of a local grocery store when my great-grandparents got married that year. And so being able to take that information and see what prices were like the year that they got married, I think is a great way to put them in social context. And then the last one here, this is Washington Township teachers. This was a list of the schools that were in the town, in the county where I grew up. And this was about the same time frame. And I said to kind of pay attention for this. So I wanted to see the Craig School, it's where it said, and there is my great-great-grandmother as the teacher there. So even if she hadn't been, I think taking this information and saying, okay, here were the schools that were in the area. How does this relate to your ancestors? The next one is to create a timeline. I think this goes with the historical and social context. And this was a really important one for me. Now, there's a lot going on in this slide, and I just want to kind of explain what we've got going on. So in the background of this slide, I have a list of all of the newspaper articles that I found that mentioned my great-grandfather living in a certain location. And so I created a spreadsheet with all of these different places. So you can see Harry's here in Des Moines, Harry is in Martinsville. And based on the information where the newspaper was and the information that surrounded these articles, I know these were 100% my great-grandfather. So he's in Des Moines, he's in Martinsville, Indiana, he's in San Francisco, he is going to Purdue, which is in Lafayette, Indiana. So all of these are part of this huge list that help me kind of track my grandfather. Now, when I track him on the census, I do not see this wide range of locations, but I've tracked it here on the map, showing where he's gone from A to B to C to D to E to F. Crazy. And within a short period of time, within 4 years. So I think to create a timeline of your ancestors and find articles that kind of match that timeline for them to kind of build out either locations of where they were or just their general story is a great way to help add context and information to your family's stories. Inspire and spark curiosity. This is the one where I think that it leads to great fodder for other stories. So a couple of things here. So this one, I have no clue any kind of information or background about this, but I found this in the newspaper and was like, I want to know more about it. So it's telling me that my great-grandfather was appointed as a guardian for this individual. No idea who he is, not related to the family in any way, shape, or form that I'm aware of. He became his guardian because he had an appetite for whiskey. So that immediately makes me want to search more for Mr. Lindley here and just try to get some more information as to why that would happen in 1892. This one is a change of residence, and this kind of goes back to that idea of that timeline. So this is an example. This was my grandmother's parents, and they moved to Circleville. I have no idea where Circleville is. And it said he accepted a position at the International Harvester Company. So those kind of two pieces of information give me fodder for a story. Okay, where is Circleville in Indiana? Where was the International Harvester Company? And just to write a story about that piece. And then this one over here is on my paternal grandfather's line. And I would not have known to pay attention to or pick this up if I was just looking at kind of the dates, names, and facts in my family tree. So this was from 1899, and this was um, a cousin. She was born, and what's interesting is it said she was born on March 6th, but that was an eventful day for the Hamilton family because my great great grandmother, my great grandfather, and this cousin were all born on the same day. And again, that's one of those stories I really would not have put those dots together had it not been for the newspaper. So being able to take this and writing a story about kind of the all three of them, having a birthday on that particular day. And then the last one is family dynamics and the different types of relationships or maybe even family members that you can find from newspaper articles that you didn't know about before. So one of my favorite stories is my great 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 grandfather, Henry Von Poole, lived in Cincinnati. And when he was 78 years old, he married a pretty young woman named Ida Lamond. And Ida was not even 30. And so I was shocked, to say the least, when I found this newspaper article. There was absolutely nothing in my family history or research that I had found that let me know that he had gotten married at such an old age to this young lady. And it was quite a spectacle. So finding newspaper articles, I learned all kinds of things about this particular marriage. And then this other one was for my great great grandmother, and it was talking about just her sister. And so this is kind of the idea of looking at not just your direct line, but looking at indirect lines too. So her sister was married to somebody that had a famous summer resort in Lenox, Massachusetts in 1886, and there had been a fire there recently. So that immediately led me to want to kind of pull together her family line, her siblings, and then find out more information about this famous summer resort in Lenox, Massachusetts. So I hope I've given you some really great things to think about when it comes to newspapers and using those to help tell fantastic family stories. Don't limit yourself to those births, marriages, deaths, and military records. Really broaden your horizons. Think about what other ways you can use newspapers to help tell your family stories. I hope you have the best of luck researching and have fun telling those family tales.